So the last, I say, 8, 9 years, there's more interest, especially the last 5 years. There has been more interest on Bible in oral Bible translation because I think at first it was practical. When there's the number says that just 700 plus languages have the whole Bible, and 1,300 plus languages have the New Testament. That's around 30% of the whole amount of languages that we have in the world, 7,000 plus languages in the world. And most of those languages are primarily oral cultures, or are from primarily oral cultures. And that represented a problem, or that represent a problem if you want to do written translation, because you have to first send an expert on literacy. And they have to create an alphabet. They have to create orthography. They have to create a grammar. They have to teach people to how to read and how to write. And they have to
they have to teach them how to read and write their own language.
Their own language.
Oral up to this point, yeah.
And that takes around 10 to 15 years, at least in the past. So before you start to translate the Bible, you have to do a process that takes 10 to 15 years. And then you need to translate the Bible. That takes around 10, 15, or 20 years, depending on funding and availability of the people. In the process, some of the cultures were reluctant to adopt a written approach to Bible translation. So at first, it were the biblical agencies that says we need written translation, but people are refusing. What can we do? Okay, let's focus on the people that want a written translation. But then you still have that problem in the other side. So 6 years ago, I started working in that approach of oral Bible translation. I would say without knowing.
You walked into it, huh?
Yeah, it was really dark in some in some ways, but we came with some conception from the system we use in written Bible translation, and I say that the first 2 years for me were a school in the ways that I need to get deeper into orality, but at the same time I need to get deeper into orality in the Hebrew Bible and orality for the Christians in the first century. Something that I learned is that orality in the Hebrew Bible is really, really close, or in some ways the same that orality in this culture. So this make Bible translation easier in some ways. For at first, the goal was to start oral Bible translation with the written Bible translation in mind. So let's do 3, 4, or 5 years of oral Bible translation, and then we can move to written Bible translation. And we find out that some of these cultures, they don't want a written Bible translation.
Right.
Because orality is part of what they do. Orality is the way that they pass from one generation to the other generation, from fathers to son, their tradition and their culture.
Can I ask, in the same way that, as modern Western people, whatever that means, we tend to think like unless it's written out in a document, then it's not real. We didn't have this conversation unless you send me an email kind of thing. You have the opposite mentality there. Like, yeah, we can have this written text, but really, if you want to make it legitimate, it needs to be orally transmitted between generations. Is that the feel you get from it?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So in most cases, people respect the oral more than the written, because there's a whole dynamic around orality that we thought it was primitive, but this culture kept in some ways. And what is fascinating is that uh, some people know how to speak Spanish or Ilocano in the case of the Philippines where I work too, and their indigenous language, even though Spanish is a second language, so they know how to interact between literacy in Spanish. In some ways, it's not pure literacy, and their orality and their oral culture. So that's something they really really respect. Uh, so when so at first we use a written translation as a media to translate to their language. I mean, it's what you do in indigenous translation. So for our audience, what we do is like, because it has been difficult until now. Some people are experimenting with that to teach Hebrew and Greek and Aramaic to some indigenous people. What we do is that we use English or Dutch in the case of Suriname, or Spanish in the case of our context in some countries of Latin America. So they translate from a translation, and then the consultant, that's my role, comes to the community and we check verse by verse the translation, and we check that it doesn't go further from Hebrew uh, or Greek. In some cases, for example, talking about idioms, the written translation either don't translate the idioms, or it translate the idiom without having in mind that the indigenous language have the same idiom that you have in the Hebrew Bible.
Oh yeah. So there's actually like a more, I don't want to say primal. There's a closer conceptual and linguistic connection between the indigenous language and ancient Hebrew.
Yes, because there are oral
they're
cultures.
going over from Spanish. They're going up to Spanish. They're going over to Spanish, and then from Spanish over to the indigenous language,
Exactly.
which confuses it.
Yeah. These indigenous languages have the same ambiguities that you see in language in the Hebrew Bible. You're a scholar of Old Testament scholar. You know that
Yeah.
sometimes people want to get rid of ambiguity, and it's there. There's
Yeah, it's
nothing
very
you can do
difficult.
about
Yeah.
that, and they are like, yes, it's like that. What is the answer of A or B? Yes.
Yeah, it's A. Yes, A and B.
But
So
you have to define that. No, 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 no.
yeah.
It is what it is. So there was a direct relation between Hebrew and even Greek and these languages, and that was a big discovery, because in that way we can go straight from Hebrew, though we have to do like a translation to Spanish or Dutch or or Ilocano, but respecting the oral features of the Hebrew Bible, for example.
Do you feel like as you've worked on this project, you have learned yourself more about the orality of the Hebrew Bible from these indigenous people?
Oh yeah, that makes me explore the oral features of the Hebrew Bible. At first, when I started reading Hebrew, I was like, this is. I remember reading Genesis chapter 1, and I was like, this is purely oral. There's no
yeah.
way this was conceived to be to be read. Uh, so I have to get deep, and at the same time, we were talking about theology and the way people are affected from the theologies imposed from outside, and it was really sad that for these people that are from oral cultures, that we have to teach in the oral features of Hebrew or Greek for them to validate their orality. So that's something that I discovered. So they because they are involved into the written translation of the Bible, even though they don't understand everything. I have to get deeper into orality in the Bible to let them know this is how the Bible express concepts. This is how the Bible communicate. This redundancy that you have for you to memorize something, a story, or to chant something in your community, C. We have that redundancy too in the Hebrew Bible. So I have to get deeper into the oral features of the Hebrew Bible to validate their orality.
Did you find that they could see things in the Hebrew that you could not, or at least the oral features of the Hebrew? Or were they asking questions you hadn't thought of before?
They don't really ask questions, so we discover things.
As you figure out how to translate it. Yeah, we
we,
should
we
also
discover
point
things
out.
together. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had a delay there. We should also point out what you're doing with this translation, because people might think that you're translating it into a text that you're going to hand them. But maybe you could explain what is the translation.
Okay, so oral Bible translation is translation for orality. In our case, and I work in Guatemala, Mexico, and the Philippines, the translation is for memorization and performance. And this is something that I learned too. Sorry, is that in our case, we think that when you go to a certain age, you lose your capacity to memorize. And what we have found out is that we have translators that are 65 years old or 70 years old, and they have 4 hours of Bible in their mind.
Wow.
So is that they keep memorizing the biblical text.